You'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Tonight on Farage, we discuss defence. Why are we not taking it seriously? Why is it not being discussed in the leadership election? Because it really, really isn't. Antidepressants. How can 8 million people have been prescribed them? What good or what harm is it doing to society? The Labour Party. What does Keir Starmer do? Is he with the unions? Is he against the unions? Is he neutral? We need to find out. And joining me on Talking Pints, a great eccentric Lembit Opik. All of that coming up after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. The top stories tonight on GB News. Conservative leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss facing each other again tonight, this time in Leeds. They're taking part in the first of 12 Tory hustings. Tax and spending, the likely topics of contention as they take questions from party members. They'll both be hoping to secure votes before their summer tour of the country. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak saying he is the underdog of the race.
I want to be honest with people about the challenges that we face as an economy, want to be responsible in dealing with them and talk to people about my vision about how we can realise the opportunities of Brexit and keep it safe, but also help people with the cost of living and crucially tackle inflation, because that is the enemy that makes everyone poorer. I've got plans to do that, and then I do think I'm the best person to beat Keir Starmer, as some recent polling out today showed, and that's something that's really resonating with members because they want to win the next election, and I believe I'm the best person to help us do that.
Well, in news away from politics, the parents of 12-year-old Archie Battersby have failed to persuade the Supreme Court to stop doctors from ending his life support treatment. They asked justices to give them more time to carry on their fight, but the request was refused. Doctors say Archie is clinically brain dead after he went into a coma in April. His mother says she thinks he was attempting an online challenge. A man has been jailed in the first ever televised hearing inside a criminal court in England and Wales today. Judge Sarah Munro QC's comments were streamed from the Old Bailey live this morning. She made legal history as she handed Ben Oliver a life sentence for killing his grandfather. Unions have announced further rail strikes for this Saturday and again on August the 13th in a dispute over pay. ASLEF says train drivers at 9 companies are set to walk out. It said strikes are the last resort until their pay is in line with inflation, and that's after passengers faced another day of disruption due to yesterday's strikes. And workers at Britain's biggest and busiest container port have also voted to strike in a dispute over pay. Members of the Unite Union backed industrial action at Felixstowe in Suffolk by 9-1. The union saying an offer of a 5% pay rise is to them an effective wage cut because of the soaring rate of inflation. And just lastly, the actor Bernard Cribbins has died at the age of 93. Famous perhaps most for narrating The Wombles back in the day and starring in the movie The Railway Children, as well as the series Doctor Who and all the Carry On films he took part in, his career spanned 7 decades. Bernard Cribbins, who died at the age of 93. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, overnight, Sir Stephen Lovegrove, who is our UK National Security Advisor, has given, I think, a pretty dire warning, and one we need to think about and certainly debate. He said that because of a lack of dialogue that is going on in the world between us and potential aggressors, it's a risk of a rapid escalation to strategic conflict. What he means by that is a risk, ultimately, of nuclear war. He makes the point that even during the Cold War, there was a certain understanding between the two sides and lines of communication were open. Now, I don't often praise Joe Biden on this programme, but the fact that Joe Biden has been on the phone today to President Xi of China can only be a good thing. Surely Churchill's mantra of war is better than jaw must be right. So we don't just face what's going on in the Ukraine. Taiwan is directly under threat from an increasingly militaristic and expansionist Chinese Communist Party. The world is not in a good place, and yet we barely discuss these things in this country. So my question to you at home tonight is, are we taking defence and security matters seriously enough? Let me know your thoughts. Farage@gbnews.uk, because I certainly don't think we are. I've been appalled at the way in which since 2010 we run down our armed services, we don't discuss vital foreign policy matters, and even what is happening in Ukraine. Well, frankly, it seems to me most of the British public are frankly bored with it at this moment in time. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that's the impression I've got. And yet we have a contest for who will be the next British Prime Minister, and the first function of government and of a Prime Minister is to protect the nation. Defence is ultimately the #1 priority. Unless I've missed something, it's barely being discussed. Well, joining me to discuss all of this and more is Robert Fox, defence editor of the London Evening Standard, a veteran, I think I can call you, of these of these matters. But you've been writing, travelling the world, studying this stuff for a long, long time. I mean, am I right to say that we do potentially face greater threats than we have for a very long time?
Yes, in a word, because as Stephen Lovegrove said, what he had got his finger on, there is hugely greater uncertainty. And particularly Putin now, in his current mood, is very, very unpredictable. But not only he, as you're saying, things are looking very fragile and wobbly right around the Pacific at the moment.
Yeah, and with Putin, you know, when you get British cabinet ministers saying we're going to put him on a Nuremberg-style war crimes trial, is that the right rhetoric to be using?
No. Because he is a problem. He has produced a problem with the invasion of Ukraine, a sovereign, independent country. We've signed up to the sovereignty and the independence through things like the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which Russia signed up to, or whatever. We believe it has its place, and Britain has guaranteed in the past that it should be an independent member of the United Nations. Putin is on a roll. He is up to something. It is very difficult to see in his mind, but we know that that is threatening. Yes, his foreign minister, Lavrov, has said, we want regime change. In other words, we want to wipe out Ukraine as a separate entity. It's a threat. An independent, westward-looking Ukraine in whatever form is seen as a threat to Russia as constituted under the regime of Putin and friends. And that's where the trouble really starts. Because they're saying they're worried about the Eastern NATO partners. How seriously do we take the partnership? But it's not theoretical. Very quickly, it is of vital security interest to this country in terms of things like food, energy security, keeping sea lanes open. We're in the mix as much as anybody. And as you quite say, surprisingly, Biden seemed to get this quite early on.
But, I mean, presumably wars come to an end at some point through a negotiation. Is there any attempt to talk to Putin? Or is this the wrong time, in your opinion?
It seems to be the wrong time at the moment because nobody that has leverage, and Erdogan of Turkey has tried it.
He's trying to be the broker, hasn't he?
Yeah, and various others. And even, I think, people in behind Xi for various reasons in China. It's very complicated, but very important how they see Russia and all that. They want stealth. They don't want this confrontation. Putin is in no mood to talk at the moment, nor, of course, is Zelensky, as he reminds us every night. But you're quite right. I think that the nostrum must be, and I wish we were hearing it from our two potential future prime ministers: confront, contain, but contact. The 3 C's. And there's no sign of that at all.
Bring our viewers and listeners up to speed, because thus far, in this debate for who's going to be the next Conservative leader, and indeed our next Prime Minister, it's all about tax. There's virtually nothing else being discussed. Where are they on Ukraine? Where are they on China? Where are they on defence?
Well, they haven't focused on the fact that the security, as I said, is home and abroad. They're contained at the moment. That's why it's not a bolt-on nuisance, which is what a lot of people in the Treasury traditionally have seen it as. It is as the brighter brains in our strategic thinking are saying, what is going on in Ukraine is non-discretionary. I just want to say that we are seeing a revolution in war. It's the dark war, the digital war, which has frightening implications, and we don't fully understand it, and we should be focusing on that. Now, to answer your question, I have only heard so far. Sunak earlier this year thought defence was too expensive and he wanted cuts. And of course, Treasury, it's the easiest one, and they always look at the third-party fire and theft, as it were, which is welfare, pensions and things like that. They wanted to cut personnel again. Now, Truss is more interesting. She said she supported that, but she did mutter, we'll support Ukraine as far as we can afford it. So that could mean anything.
Yeah, we don't really want Ukraine to win, do we?
Well, I think there's a tremendous problem that if... By the way, I don't think Ukraine is going to lose. I think Ukraine will go on. It will go on. It's got this.
There's going to be a stalemate in the East, isn't there?
Exactly.
Yes.
By the way, Nigel, there are several of them around. Georgia, for example, the Caucasus, and so on. And that's what I fear. It's not going to be a not quite frozen war, and it will blow up from time to time in unpredictable ways because Ukraine is so close to the Baltics. It's so close to the entrance to the Atlantic, and that's why. I'm sorry. Non-discretionary. It's a must.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert Fox, for joining us. And I hope we've made the case this evening between the two of us that this must be taken more seriously, and the leadership candidates to be our next Prime Minister have to be questioned on this more thoroughly, more eagerly over the course of the next, goodness me, there's almost 6 weeks left, believe it or not, in this election. We are not taking defence seriously enough, and I believe that very, very strongly. Now, 2016, we woke up on the 24th of June. We'd left the European Union. We'd said we were going. And one of the key campaigning issues was fisheries. We wanted back control of our territorial waters. And we wanted, like Norway, no longer to be throwing back dead into the sea huge tonnages of fish. It was wasteful. It was wrong in every single way. But you know something? We're 6 years on, and I'm sorry to say, very little has improved. Have a look at this quick video clip. It was taken last week in St Maurs in South Cornwall by fisherman Peter Green.
1,000 kilo. £3 a kilo, be nice. Dancing on the decks. No quota, got to be dumped. Just spoke to the MMO, did the decent thing. Any chance of landing any of it, especially with the cost of fuel? You don't catch any other fish, you can see that. It's spur dogs, spur dogs and spur dogs. No, so it's got to be dumped.
And the MMO that was referred to there by Peter Green is the Marine Management Organisation, and they come out with a line that catching spur dogs is prohibited by UK fishing vessels under restrictions. And indeed there was a shortage of spur dogs a few years ago. Spur dogs, better known to you at home as Huss. That was the mainstay of Huss and chips in our fish and chip shops, and was always quite a lot cheaper, actually, than cod or haddock. Peter Green from St Mawes joins me now. Peter, good evening and welcome to the programme.
Yes, good evening to you, Nigel.
I can remember in the run-up to the referendum, this was an issue that I talked about and campaigned on, and then Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall started to talk about this dreadful waste of natural resources and discards, of course, becoming key. I think most people at home thought with Brexit this problem had been solved. Peter, let me ask you, are things any better 6 years on from the referendum, or are we stuck where we were?
In my opinion, Nigel, we're in a worse situation than we were 6 years ago. The quota situation hasn't improved whatsoever. The idea was that we would have our waters back, but in particular, French and Dutch boats would be kept outside of our 12-mile limit. The quotas could be realigned, and the inshore fleet would benefit or have what fish it was surely entitled to. As you say, with the spur dogs, there was a complete ban on spur dog fishing about 10 or it might be 12 years ago, because they said the scientific data in brackets was unsure about the state of the stock, so we were stopped then from fishing for them. But the problem is, we started to catch spur dogs, although it was one whole wonder, as two other boats did exactly the same in the same area. I put that video up, and I've heard from people in Ireland, north of Scotland, west of England, North Cornwall, wherever you look, they're spur dogs, and they're going to have to be dumped the same for everybody. Absolute waste of money, waste of fish.
Yeah, I mean, it's a waste of your fuel, it's a waste of your time, but environmentally, I mean, it is absolutely shocking, I think, to everybody. Is there any way we can get fishing back on the menu? Is there any way we can start to get our politicians realising and the public realising that, frankly, Brexit has not been delivered to the UK fishing industry?
Well, we thought we had that. I mean, as you're well aware, a lot of fishermen did vote for Brexit. And I think a lot of the public followed the fishermen in sympathy almost, because they knew we were having a hard time, especially in the share of quota in the English Channel. But what's happened, I think that as negotiations continued in Brexit, I believe that more and more of our fishing was given away by Boris. And the rights were given away, much as Edward Heath did in the 70s. And we're in exactly the same situation as we were there, if not worse.
Brexit and saw fisheries as being absolutely totemic of why we should leave. I regret to say that I agree with you. There is a lot more to be done, and I can assure you, I and many others will be shouting this corner to make sure we get a proper Brexit. Thank you for coming on the programme tonight, for sharing that horrible video with us. It's wrong. It's got to be stopped. We'll speak to you again. Thank you. In a moment, we will talk about antidepressants. I have been absolutely horrified about the sheer number of antidepressants being prescribed in this country, where medical evidence seems to be turning against the chemical need for them. We'll also, with Ken Livingstone, talk about Keir Starmer, the Labour Party. What should the Labour Party's relationship with the trade unions be?
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, holding Oldham Council to account tonight, the man who's been at the forefront of the fight to get justice for the victims of child grooming gangs in his hometown, Councillor Brian Hoban, will be making his case for a public inquiry into what he calls serious failings. Our statsman Jamie Jenkins will be questioning the latest official data, which raises more questions about just how effective COVID vaccines are in preventing death. And transgender teacher and journalist Debbie Hayton will be shining a light on why the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic is not fit for purpose after news it will be shut down. All those stories and more on The Mark Steyn Show tonight from 8 o'clock.
Welcome back. So are we taking defence seriously enough, and why is it not being properly debated in this leadership campaign? Darryl says, no, we're not, and successive governments have not taken defence seriously for the last 25 years. Wilson says, serious enough for UK forces to have trained 32,000 Ukrainians to NATO standards over the last 10 years. Well, yes, Wilson, I wasn't saying that our services do nothing. It's a question of, are they big enough? Are they well enough equipped? One viewer says, it's about time this government stopped the illegal boat crossings from France and defended our own borders. We need to keep our nose out of foreign wars, because only warmongering globalists get involved in foreign wars. That, by the way, a view that is now very, very prevalent in the USA. Another says, no, we definitely do not. Just look at the cuts that have been made to the army. Well, you're absolutely right. And there is no indication with the plan of the army going down to 72,500 that either Truss or Sunak will reverse that. I find it quite astonishing that in 12 years of Tory government, we've cut the services to the extent that we have, given where the world is. Now, some years ago, I was told there were 3 million British people on antidepressants prescribed by their GPs. I found the number very, very difficult to comprehend. But that was a long time ago. Now the number, according to the NHS, and I find this hard to believe, but now the number is 8.3 million. 8.3 million people being prescribed antidepressants. And often they're on them for a very long period of time with goodness knows what side effects. Now, I'm not a medico, as you well know, but last week a very, very interesting report was produced, and Professor Joanne Moncrief is joining me here to discuss this. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
The idea that we've all understood for years is that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance. It's serotonin, lack of serotonin that causes the problem. Your recent research suggests that may not be right.
Absolutely. So people have been told this story for a long time, as you say. It started in the 1990s with the pharmaceutical industry and their marketing campaigns, and it really became a sort of cultural idea. It really became widely accepted and has continued to be promoted by doctors and other people. And However, it has been known for quite a while that the evidence on this theory didn't really stack up, that the studies were inconsistent, but no one had previously really got the evidence together and been able to take a proper overview of all the different research in the different areas. So that's what we did in our research. We looked at all the research in the main areas that have looked at links between serotonin and depression, and didn't find any convincing evidence in any of those areas for any abnormality of serotonin in depression, and certainly not for low serotonin in people.
But Joanna, you are taking on a status quo that has been there, established now for decades.
Yeah.
How is your research, how is your publication being taken by GPs, by the pharmaceutical industry? I mean, are you now outcast for daring to say this?
Well, one common response is, oh, well, we've known for ages it's not low serotonin, but it's probably some other complicated neurochemical problem. But the problem with that response is there isn't any evidence for any other neurochemical hypothesis either. I mean, the serotonin hypothesis is one of the clearest hypotheses. It's had one of the it's had a vast amount of research looking at it, and it turns out not to be right. So any other neurochemical, any other proposition that depression is due to this chemical or that chemical is just speculation. It's not, it's not a proven scientific fact.
It is this number. I mean, it can't be right. 8.3 million can't be right, surely.
It's 8.3 million in England alone.
Goodness
as
me.
well. I know. So it's staggering, and that's been going up steadily over the last few decades. And of particular concern is that it's going up in young people a lot at the moment. And as you said, more and more people are taking these drugs for long periods of time, which we have to worry about. And I think how that relates to my research as well is, if we don't have evidence that the drugs are working by rectifying an underlying imbalance, we know that they are affecting serotonin, so we have to conclude that they're actually changing the brain chemistry in some way. And if you change your brain chemistry over a long period of time, that may have harmful effects.
Joanna Moncrief, I thank you for coming on, talking about your research. I'm alarmed by these figures. We talk a lot about illegal drugs and the damage they do in society. I wonder whether we talk enough about legally prescribed drugs and the potential harm they could cause. I'm going to return to this issue, and I want you to come back, please, and keep me up to date with where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much indeed. Well, I have to say, I find those numbers absolutely, totally and utterly shocking. Now, the Labour Party, we saw yesterday, didn't we? Sam Tarry, in direct contravention of what Sir Keir Starmer said. It's the RMT strike. Sam Tarry, there he was, Shadow Minister for Buses and Local Transport, although in his interview with Good Morning Britain, he did seem to promote himself to being Shadow Minister for Transport. And he was sacked by Starmer yesterday. Now, whether that was strength on Starmer's part or weakness on Starmer's part, you can be at home and speculate about. But what is an interesting, much wider debate is what now is the relationship of the Labour Party, or perhaps more importantly, the wider Labour movement, with the trade union movement. After all, they worked hand in glove for decade after decade. It would appear, would it not? And I'm joined by Ken Livingstone, not currently a Labour Party member. You've been in and out over the year, but the Labour movement, of course, Ken, has been your whole life.
Of course. I mean, back in the 1960s, I joined a trade union, I joined the Labour Party. They were totally integrated. I mean, at my local Labour Party meeting, there were all these delegations from the trade unions and other people like me and so on. And you work together. In actual fact, the Labour Party had been created by the trade unions about a century ago. And the idea now that, I mean, you've got a Labour leader who sacks somebody for supporting workers on strike. And those people working on the rail industry, they're being given pay cuts. I mean,
hang on. They're being offered 8% pay rise over the next 2 years.
Over 2 years, but there'll be about 15% inflation. I mean, for the last couple of years, across, I mean, the private and public sector, people's wage increases haven't kept up with inflation. People are worse off.
That is without doubt true. And I felt when Mick Lynch first went onto the airwaves, he was commanding a fair bit of public sympathy. He's good at it, you know. But when suddenly an offer for 8% over 2 years comes, and people say, well, I get that doesn't keep pace with inflation, but it's more than I'm going to get. I mean, aren't we in one of those situations where every pay demand that comes from a trade union, Ken, can't be met?
Well, it can be met. We're the 5th richest nation in the world, but almost all the wealth that's created go to that richest 1%, or 1/10 of 1%. I mean, we were, in the last 40 years, inequality in Britain has doubled. I was born at the end of the war, and in that first 30 years after the war, inequality was halved. We were all optimistic. Every year, everything got better. Everybody got a job. I mean, if you couldn't buy a home, you'd eventually get a council home, things like that. Now look at the world we're in.
I agree that the rich have got richer. I completely agree with that. I understand that. Although, fair to say, the top 1% do pay 30% of tax revenues.
No. They launder it all through dodgy deals in the Middle East.
Hang on. Not everybody that's rich and successful is a crook.
But most of the people...
And socialists get that wrong.
The super rich don't pay their fair share.
But let's get back to the point.
Yeah.
We've now got the threat of strikes in sector after sector, both across the public and the private sectors. Isn't the lesson, the harsh lesson from the 1970s, that if you give in to trade union and private sector demands for wage increases in line with inflation, all you do is fuel inflation further?
No. I mean, the simple fact is you can't expect that ordinary people with a family to care for should see a pay cut on the scale we've been seeing in the last few years. This is ridiculous. As I said, we're the 5th richest nation in the world. With a
massive deficit, Ken.
Yes. And that's why I'm opposed to any more borrowing. We should be cutting on. When I became the leader of the Great London Council, we had a huge debt. I actually each year reduced that.
So how do we pay? How do we give pay increases in line with inflation and not increase debt?
We have a fairer tax system.
So
literally,
you want to tax
the richest people don't pay any tax at all. They launder all their money overseas and things like that.
That is just not fair.
Of course it's not fair, but it is true.
It's not right.
And many of our largest companies are laundering their money abroad. They're not paying tax. I mean, literally, the inequality in terms of tax burdens has just become absolutely intolerable.
Ken, if you pursue that route, and you remember that in 1979, top rate income, forget unearned income, but income tax top rate was 83%. And it saw a flight of our young graduates, our young talented people. They left for other parts of the world.
When I got my first job in 1962, the Tory Prime Minister, Macmillan, the top rate of tax on the richest was 98%. And that was the norm.
That was unearned income. Yeah. And Keir Starmer, what does he do? Because he's positioning himself a little bit piggy in the middle here, isn't he? He's not coming down on side of the unions. He's not trying to oppose them. What should he do?
Well, when he was running for leader, I supported him. I've been disappointed. The sacking of the MP today, I think, is wrong. I think the trouble with Keir is he's trying to accommodate to the right too much. But if you want a good Labour victory at the next election, you have to have good radical socialist policies, like when Wilson won in '64, you know.
Didn't work for Corbyn, did it?
Well, the real problem for Jack, you actually look back, Jeremy had been leader for 2 years, and then there was the 2017 election. He got the biggest increase in the Labour vote for 72 years, came within 2% of defeating the Tories. But then you had all these lies and smears about anti-Semitism. And
they were lies, were they?
Of course. I mean, I've been in the Labour Party since 1969. In all that time, I've never heard a single anti-Semitic comment. I've only ever heard one racist comment back in 1970. If you're racist or anti-Semitic, you've got to join the Labour. The Labour Party has been the political homeland for the Jewish community for a century. When I got elected to Parliament back in '87, almost every Jewish MP was sitting on the Labour benches.
Ken Livingstone, it's great to have you on the show.
Wonderful.
And the great thing about GB News is we're here for free speech. We want Labour voices, we want Conservative voices. You get my voice and opinion too, but we think you're big enough and ugly enough at home to make your own minds up. And we're about free speech, and that's what really matters. I'm sure Ken and I...
That's why I watch you every day.
Well, thank you. Now, a couple of What the Farage moments. Now, the Tavistock Clinic, which has been very much criticised for giving transgender altering drugs to under 18s, has been closed down by the government. These things will be dealt with at regional levels, which is good. But here's something that's going to shock you. Have a look at this graph of fuel prices in the UK and compare them with our neighbours. Have a look at this. It's absolutely stunning It's frightening. So there it is. It's absolutely stunning. It's frightening. So there it is. Let's take diesel, shall we? Diesel in the UK, 1.96 a litre. In the USA, 1.15. Go to Japan, it's 88p. Go to the rest of Europe, it's 30p cheaper. Now look. The fact is, we are, whatever Ken says about tax on those that earn a lot of money, we're all paying way too much tax compared to our neighbours. And when everybody tells you that it's all about world market prices, that is nonsense. You can see there, actually, we're living in rip-off Britain. Now, Bernard Cribbins, who for decade after decade appeared in films, on our televisions, in plays. He did comedy, he sang, he did drama. And I wanted to pay a little tribute to 93-year-old Bernard Cribbins with From 1962. And it's a wonderful, light, humorous, but it's also self-deprecatory about the British workman. Here's Right Said Fred with Bernard Cribbins.
Right said Fred, both of us together, one each end and steady as we go. Tried to shift it, couldn't even lift it. We was getting nowhere, and so we had a cup of tea. And right said Fred, give a cup of Charlie.
And Bernard Cribbins' career started in 1957. His first film was the Yangtze Incident, and he went on all through the 50s and 60s in films, a list as long as your arm. His first carry-on film in the early 60s, Carry On Jack, Carry On Spying, The Dalek Invasion of the Earth, Casino Royale with Peter Sellers, of course the epic Railway Children from 1970, Carry On Columbus, and then when it comes to television, Bernard Cribbins, he was in David Copperfield. He was the voice of the Wombles for the first 60 episode. He was, of course, in Fawlty Towers. He was in Wurzel Gummidge. He was in Coronation Street. He was in Last of the Summer Wine. He was, of course, in Doctor Who, in Midsummer Murders, and well into his 80s. His last role in 2016 is he played the voice of great Uncle Bulgaria in The Wombles. Truly an absolute legend who touched the lives of all of us over decade after decade after decade. And we pay tribute tonight to Bernard Cribbins, his contribution to our country, and for helping to make us smile, which is really important. Now, my guest tonight for Talking Pints makes a lot of people smile for a very wide variety of reasons. I view him as one of my most eccentric friends, former Lib Dem, Member of Parliament, Lembit Opik. He'll be here on Talking Pints.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's time for Talking Pints, and I'm joined by former Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament and many other things, and a friend of mine, Lembit Opie.
Good to see you,
Very
sir.
good to see you. It's been far too long.
Yeah.
Cheers. Now, Lembit, I guess you were in Parliament for 13 years. I think because of all the different things you've done since then, many people may have forgotten that there once was a serious Lembit Opie. Is this possible? I mean,
there's always been a serious Lembit Opie. There's been a serious Nigel Farage, but we do it with a smile.
We do. What was it like? I mean, you got elected as a Liberal Democrat MP for that seat, Montgomeryshire. Did you enjoy being an MP?
At the beginning, yes. I was sort of pushed into it because at that point, being a Lib Dem was a good career move. And I was training a lot of other people, including Ed Davey at the time. And they said, look, Lembit, you've got to stand up and be candid yourself. It was great. I got elected in 97. Real privilege to be in the Mother of Parliament. First 5 years, tremendous. Second 5 years, even better. But then it kind of lost its lustre. And that's because at the very best, the Lib Dems were really an inspirational group, and people like Paddy Ashton, and I have to say Charles Kennedy, they were really good fun to work with, and they had a mission. And then I think the party lost its way, and that's when I stopped enjoying it.
You see, I mean, liberal, the old-fashioned use of the word liberal is that you believe in free speech, you believe in supporting the small, the weak, but you absolutely believe that people should be free to do what the hell they like, provided it doesn't impinge directly on others. I mean, liberalism now means control. It means banning things that they don't approve of. What's gone wrong with liberalism?
No, liberalism doesn't mean control, but the Liberal Democrats today interpret it as control. Everything from what I think is a ridiculously authoritarian environmental crisis agenda, which I don't agree with at all, right through to more or less saying you can do anything you like as long as it's not offensive. Way wrong answer. Libertarianism says you can offend other people because that's what free speech is about. It's easy to let people talk if you actually agree with them. But the real test is if you're willing to tolerate people when they don't agree. Look how well you and Ken get on. You've got completely different political views, but you both respect free speech.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's what got me into politics.
Absolutely. And what was the final break? Was it Brexit that was the final break with the Lib Dems for you?
It was. I thought that they were completely patronising about Brexit. At that point, I was even Remainish, though subsequently I think the events have proved you are 100% right. It was really the lack of liberalism, libertarianism. Yeah. You couldn't be who you wanted to be unless you conform to the woke agenda, which in itself is conformism. And that's when I said, I've said this publicly before, Nick Clegg didn't strike me as a liberal Democrat in my traditional interpretation. So it was when they didn't have a proper talk about potentially legalising drugs, which seems to be the only solution in my view. I may be wrong, but you couldn't even talk about it. They thought that they could impose an international agenda. I think it was described once as the Britishman marching across the world with a gun in one hand and a Bible in the other. That's not liberalism. And that wasn't me. So I feel the party's moved rather than me.
Yeah, well, since 2010, you've, of course, become many, many things. And very outspoken on climate change now. You know, we're told that sea levels are rising, record temperatures last week. Man is causing this catastrophe. What say you, Lembit Opie?
It's rubbish. There is no climate crisis because...
Well, the terrible fires burning in Europe last week.
Yes, but if you look at the facts, you'll find that June was a colder June than we've had for years. The Antarctic ice sheet is actually increasing. You don't get told that. In fact, the Antarctic recorded its second coldest 6 months last year in recorded history. That doesn't fit the zeitgeist. Fundamentally, CO2 can't drive the agenda can't drive the climate. It drives the agenda. Now, I've been studying this for 44 years. I actually had my first thing published about this whole subject when I was 15 back in 1980, so not a Johnny-come-lately to this. I'll challenge anyone who's watching to send me the data to show that human-caused CO2, or CO2 generally, is massively affecting the climate. It's not. What does affect it is orbits, the way the Earth goes around the sun, which we can't change, and the sun's cycles itself and other things to do with how currents work in the ocean. So it's a scientific view. I've got nothing invested in it in that sense, apart from the fact I loathe the fact we've got a new religion.
Most people disagree with you, but you believe it and you argue for it. And let's stick with space. Asteroids. I mean, you became famous in Parliament, I think. And I thought, God, he's an absolute nutcase, this bloke. I mean, he's off the wall, this one. And for telling us that the biggest threat we faced wasn't climate change, it was asteroids.
And it still is.
Explain.
It is. My grandfather was an astronomer, my father a nuclear physicist. So from a scientific point of view, I could see that the pioneering work my grandfather did about this, that Earth had been hit by asteroids before and it would happen again, was on the money, and we needed to do something about it. Because never mind if we have a warm climate, if we all get incinerated by a 10-kilometre wide asteroid, then there won't be many awards for saying I told you so. I actually made a rather thoughtless statement in one of my
isn't this more alarmist than even the climate change people?
Yes, but with a good cause. The dinosaurs aren't here really to pick up the pieces. They were incinerated by a single object that came in over the Gulf of Mexico. We saw something in Russia not long ago, which actually injured 2,000 people. In 1908, an object hit Siberia big enough to incinerate everything around us right out to the M25. So this has happened before. 50,000 tons of space rock hits the Earth every year, but normally in small bits. So maybe I do sound cranky on this, but the science is with me. Oh, thanks very much indeed.
No, it's all right.
I will find you and say I told you so. That would be my last breath.
No, well, we'll all be dead. It won't matter.
Posthumous.
OK, fine. I hear what you're saying. What can we do about it?
We can actually mitigate. The way to do it is to see these things coming 10, 15, 20 years out, give them a little nudge. A small nudge.
A nudge?
Yeah, that's all you can do. Don't smash them up, because then lots of bits will hit the Earth instead of one. But if you had let's say, if you had a car rolling down a hill, and the hill was 1 million miles long, a tiny nudge will mean it'll miss the house.
You see, it's fascinating, Limb. I mean, I love talking to you because, there are subjects I can discuss with you that I don't discuss with any other human being.
I know.
And I wonder, because you had, in the late 90s, quite a near-death experience, and I've been through similar things myself. You went through a paragliding accident. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yes, we share that. We both nearly died because of aeronautics. Now, I'm a passionate pilot. I love aviation. I think it's a great field of achievement for humanity. I made the mistake of becoming a paraglider. That's like a parachute that you jump off and actually are foolish enough to think you can fly with.
This is quite typical, I think, of our guests. But
well, yes, I was never one to calculate the risks. But you got lucky. But so did I, because both of us could have been killed. The wind changed, so I made a mistake with the air brakes. One way or the other, the thing collapsed. And we're about on the 6th floor here. That's how far I fell. And I landed vertically. I broke my sternum, my ribs, my jaw, and I broke my back in 12 places. Now, it was touch and go. I walked off a mountain with help from my friend Rob Burridge. Without him, I'd be dead. And it does change your point of view. And I'm sure you had a similar experience when that plane flipped over and you faced death as well. And it really was life and death. 65 miles from that mountainside to Shrewsbury Hospital, they saved my life.
Is it a different limbidopic after that?
Yes, but not immediately. I remember at the time knowing it was going to change me. I think I was fairly selfish, fairly self-obsessed. The politics of Parliament does that to you. But over time you begin to realise it can change you. I've had reconstructive surgery right up till 2 years ago, in fact. My whole face and jaw structures had to be rebuilt because I couldn't eat anymore. The reality is, all the things we moan about, all the things we complain about, are really trivial when you're actually faced with death. And I see something liberating in the way you behave, perhaps for the same reason. And if you haven't been through it, you forget that a late bus or an expensive pint is nothing when you remember that you are at least here to have those experiences.
I promised myself after the plane crash I would never let little things really anger me. And I've probably failed on that once or twice, but I do remind myself quite regularly. Well, certainly what the accident didn't do was make you shy with women.
You say that?
This is, well, I mean, Sian Lloyd, the cheeky girl, I mean, and suddenly, limbidopic Liberal Democrat member of Parliament and the guy with views that are considered off the wall by many, but he believes in, and suddenly you're tabloid Lembit, aren't you?
Yes, because the media love what seems like eccentricity.
But you loved it.
I was flattered by it. I didn't invite it.
You loved it.
Oh, I ran with it. You say you don't do the same thing, Mr. Farage.
I'm talking to you, you're not talking to me.
OK, all right, sorry. Yeah, good point, well made.
No, I mean, look, I of course, you know, when I was very much on the front pages, of course I loved it and I enjoyed it. But, I mean, the cheeky girl thing particularly, you revelled in it,
Yeah,
didn't
well,
you?
it was an authentic relationship. She was a great girl. She is a great girl, selling cars up in Yorkshire now, as is her sister. They're really decent people, and that was an authentic relationship. But what was interesting, of course, I didn't see it the way the world looked in. And I was naive to an extent, because there was a lot of, first of all, you're kind of adorned on the headlines and in the papers because it's fun, but it turns against you as well. You're supping with the devil in that situation. And it probably was instrumental in my unplanned defeat in 2010. Would I change things? No, because at the end of the day, I'd have been compromising what I believed in for the sake of being in politics, and so many people corrode their personalities and their values for doing that.
No, I agree with that.
So I was drawn into the celebrity, and it is fun. Sometimes it's really flattering, but then at the same time, it's a very, very hot potato. Sometimes you get burned.
It's like going to a good party, but there's, you know, there could be a hangover the next morning.
You might say that couldn't possibly come. Boris could help us with that one.
And since then, so Radio Kent you've been doing, and you're enjoying hosting programmes. You're a regular on GB News.
Yeah.
I mean, is Lembedopic now going to become and stay as a media personality, a commentator? What are your plans?
Well, I do quite a lot of broadcasting, and I'd love to carry on doing that. Do quite a lot of public affairs. I am still doing space. I'm the chairman of Parliament for Ascardia, the world's first space nation. I'll get you an honorary membership.
Well, I say.
And so I'm still doing that. But at the end of the day, I've got 2 kids, and that's really important to me.
And that's happened quite late in life.
Yeah, 5 years and 1 year. I wanted to call one of them pension plan and the other one COVID, but that was overruled. It's Angela and Maria, as it turns out. And Sabina's doing a good job of being them. I'm probably better than I am as a dad. When it comes down to it, all of this adds up to something that was told, I think it was by the Dalai Lama, he said, not to me directly. He said, the way to make God laugh is to tell him your plans. So I don't know where I'm going, but I'm enjoying the journey.
And you look at the country today, somebody elected to Parliament 25 years ago. How does Britain look to you today?
It's on a downward curve. I think there was this huge optimism in the early noughties. I remember thinking in about 01, 02, when Parliament was great, it was inspirational, it was positive, there was cross-party friendship. There's no doubt the Blair-Clinton relationship really was world-beating. And you felt things were great. You could actually get a 110% mortgage back then, if you remember. Now it seems that
look what that led to.
Well, it led to a lot of success and then a terrible crash in 08. But that wasn't necessarily because of what was going right in 2002. I think what's happened is partly because politics has become more oppressed, and it's got career politicians, people who've done nothing else. They don't really relate to what it's like to be in the dole queue. I was on the dole in the 80s, and many others were too. You have to swim up the river when you're out here. It's not performance-related pay, particularly when you're in Parliament. No. And I think that's what's causing the problem. Truss versus Sunak. Well, I'm not a Tory, so I won't express my view, but they're really going to have to reinvigorate faith in politics. Everybody knows, I think, Starmer's doing a really poor job as opposition leader. And so who's leading the country? Who's going to inspire the country?
And Ed Davey's leading the Lib Dems to big by-election wins.
Well, he has done very well. I used to share an office with him, and frankly, I thought they would win something, but fair play to Ed. He's capitalising it in one way, but he hasn't converted that into a very public building for the party. He's doing well by default because the others are doing badly. Who is the Churchill? Who is the leader? Who is the Farage to lead this country? And I think that's one thing that's really missing. The best years of my political life were when you had inspirational leaders like Kennedy, like Blair, I have to say, and even people like Haig, who were really engaging. Now we've gone... And funny, engaging, and they didn't take themselves too seriously. Now that's been replaced by sepia and grey, and that's the last thing a country in trouble needs.
Final thought. If we get, after the next election, a Lib Dem, Labour, SNP coalition, and we get proportional representation, would that be a good thing or a bad thing for public life in our country?
there are three problems with what you've said. SNP in that coalition means there'll be an independence for Scotland.
No, they'll get another referendum and they'll lose.
The deal would probably have to be more sophisticated than that. But OK, maybe Nicola Sturgeon would go for that. You'd certainly be reopening the breakup of the union, which I'm not too keen on. So that's a negative in my view. In terms of Labour under Starmer and the Lib Dems, Davey would try and play a straight hand, but for reasons I won't even go into on air, I don't think Starmer is the right person to lead this country, and that's a problem. And then I suppose the biggest question is, can anyone bring this country together instead of being divided? I don't think that coalition would do it. So let's hope for the best, but we've got to prepare that things won't necessarily get better. But of course, if called upon to serve under your government, no reasonable offer refused.
I'll drink to that. Thank you, Limpet, for joining me. That was Limpet Epic on Talking Pints. Terrific, thank you. We have a very short time left for Barrage the Farage. Here goes. Bob asks me, why pay a union leader 150k when they fail to reach an agreement and expect the members to do their job for them? Don't ask me. I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, trade union leaders being paid that money, still living in cheap council houses. There's probably too much of it. Can't answer it. Peter asks, do you think Trump needs to run for the next election, or would it be wiser for him to have more of a Godfather-type role, especially as the Republicans have a very talented Ron DeSantis, who is more capable of being a two-term president? You know what? I'm off to Dallas the weekend after next. It'll be one of the big CPAC conferences. Trump will be speaking. DeSantis will be there. I obviously know Trump pretty well. I have met DeSantis and sat with him at dinner. DeSantis, massively impressive. Incredible stuff that he's doing in Florida. I just think for now, Trump has got a better chance of winning that blue-collar vote from the Atlantic coast of Pennsylvania right through the Great Lakes to Wisconsin. I think Trump is still their election winner. But hey, do you know what? They've got lots of choices. Look at the Democrats. Goodness gracious me. I am done for the week. I've enjoyed this evening enormously, and I know you're up for a lot of real entertainment in a moment with Mark Stein. Hi, Mark.
Hey there, Nigel. I think you're right. I don't think DeSantis is finished in Florida. I think he's still got lots of stuff he wants to do there. And
doing a great job, though, isn't he?
Yeah, oh, no, he is. But you're right. I think the winning ticket would be Biden-Pelosi. I think they've got a combined age of about 237, and they're in pretty good shape for their age. Thank you, Nigel. Terrific show. Really enjoyed it. We got all the usual fun stuff. We've got grooming gangs. We've got exciting developments on the transgender issues. We got a little bit of Kamala Harris too, because that's always good for comedy relief. And it is all coming up on the Mark Stein Show right after the weather.
Hello there, my name's Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. It is looking mostly dry over the next 24 hours or so across the UK. There will be some showers and it stays on the warm side for many of us. High pressure just about holding on for the next 24 hours. However, as we move into the weekend, that slips away. It allows weather systems to move in from the Atlantic, bringing outbreaks of rain and stronger winds to some of us as well. For the rest of Thursday evening, though, a quiet end to the day. One or two heavy showers, though, still possible across parts of Dumfries and Galloway up into the Borders region. These continuing into the early hours. But for most, a dry night, some clear spells as well. And temperatures on the mild side, 11 to 16 Celsius. So a warm start to Friday morning, the best of the sunshine first thing across central southern parts of England and Wales. Cloudy across the Pennines up into the Borders region, some outbreaks of rain here. Plenty of sunshine initially across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Through into the afternoon, many places dry with plenty of sunny spells, though a few showers are possible across northern England, Wales, the Midlands in particular. Temperatures ranging from the low to mid-20s, highs of 26 or 27 towards the London area, so feeling warm in that sunshine. Showers through Friday evening continue for a time, but they should ease across England and Wales. However, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, we'll see weather systems move in here, bringing outbreaks of rain. Some of this could be heavy at times during the early hours, some stronger winds developing here too. But elsewhere, the dry weather holding on. And a mild night once again, temperatures 16, 17 degrees for many of us. Which means a warm start to Saturday morning. Best of the sunshine first thing across southeast England, wet across Scotland, Northern Ireland. This pushing its way southeastwards, so becoming cloudy across Wales, southwest England with some patchy rain too, but it should generally stay dry across the far southeast. The rain continues to push in through the weekend, so all of us should see some rain at some point, but temperatures staying on the warm side, highs of 26 or 27.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight is Britain's COVID inquiry asking the wrong questions about our pandemic response. Professor Sunitra Gupta, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration, is demanding to know why the efficacy of lockdowns is off the table. She'll join me live. Can we trust Rishi Sunak to tackle the Channel crisis? Political firebrand and former Brexit Party MEP Anne Widdecombe gives her verdict. Plus, there's unfiltered opinion from social media sensation Zubi and my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.